Education meeting this evening. Can we all please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance? And if our student reps can lead us. All right, this evening we're going to start with a celebration of excellence, and I'll turn this over to Mr. Bedancy.
Thank you. So, pull up my notes here. We have a very special celebration this evening. A teacher that I truly respect and admire. I'm very happy to be acknowledging her. We have Mrs. Gretchen Yatsuk, who is a teacher at Flanders Elementary School, and I'd like to share a little bit about an award that she recently received. Mrs. Yatsuk was nominated for the Wheeler Young VFW Post number 201 Teacher of the Year. After winning that award, Mrs. Yatsuk was moved on to the VFW District 2 judging. She faced some tough competition, but Mrs. Yatsuk won the VFW District 2 Teacher of the Year as well. She was then entered into the state running and once again has made Southington and Flanders School proud as she was awarded the VFW State Teacher of the Year for all of her work to honor our veterans year after year, ensuring our students and our school community take time to recognize and appreciate the veterans in our community for their service to our country. Congratulations, Mrs. Yatsuk, on the accomplishment. Well deserved. Southington is proud of you.
So I did a little research on this award, and I just want to mention a couple of things. Mr. Bedancy led in, but this is Teacher of the Year Award as part of a national VFW Citizen Education Teacher Award program, recognizing educators who teach patriotism, American history, and civic responsibility. So that's something that we need more of in this country these days. To understand what patriotism is, working together to get things done. Focus is on honoring teachers who excel at teaching Americanism, history, government, and civic responsibility. And the judgment criteria, citizenship, encouraging community involvement, innovation, using new tools and methods for engaging students, resources, tapping into outside resources like speakers, museums, and other outside resources, and a passion demonstrating enthusiasm for teaching and success of our students. And I'm honored to be standing next to you. I come from a family of educators, and I understand the passion. Teaching isn't a job. Teaching is a passion. Teaching is a calling. And I think to be able to stand here and have won this award and teaching our students to be better citizens of the United States of America and the world is something you should be very proud of. And I know we are all very proud of you to be representing our education system in Southington and to be putting our students first. So thank you very much for that.
Thank you.
So I'll present you with this certificate, and it says it's a certificate of excellence for Gretchen Yatsuk, having duly qualified under standards prescribed by the Southington Public Schools, is hereby awarded this certificate of excellence for Wheeler Young VFW Post 201, 2526 Teacher of the Year. In witness whereof the seal of the Southington Board of Education and the signature of the Board of Education Chairperson and Superintendent of Schools are hereby unto affixed on this 22nd day of January 2026. I'm honored to be standing here with you, and congratulations.
Thank you.
Would you like to say a few words?
Oh, goodness. Okay. Oh, all right. I didn't have anything prepared for this one. But first of all, thank you to the Board of Education for this honor, and of course to the VFW, and then my family who's here to support me, so thank you so much. And then I love that I do have friends that became colleagues or colleagues that became friends in both directions from elementary, middle, and high school, and I think that speaks to Southington. While it's a large town, it's a small community, and being able to reach out to our veterans, and my dad is a veteran, so he's my favorite one, sorry about that. But so he comes every year, and I only am so involved because Dan Merzik started it at Flanders, and then 24 years later, I'm still doing it there at Flanders. And I love that day. It's a special day. Mrs. Garrett always encourages it because she also has a dad who's a veteran, and Dan's dad is a veteran, so it's very easy to keep us actively involved. But to have my friends here, too, across all grade levels, like it just shows that Southington is such a small community, and to be able to reach out to our veterans and thank them for all of their efforts and everything they do for us, and to honor them for one day at school, but in anything that we can do with our students. I know we have parents that have said it's their favorite day at Flanders, and they're sad when their students are out because they don't get to come anymore. So I'm glad that they hold that day true to their hearts as well. So thank you for this very much.
We are going to take a 5-minute recess so the board members can come down and say congratulations, and we'll resume in 5 minutes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hold up, hold it up.
Terry, getting up? You want to help you down? Yeah, I'm gonna go down. I want to, you know, I want to say hello to you.
You probably know more about the award than I do, to be honest, because it was so
Is approval of minutes from our January 8th, 2026 meeting.
So moved. Second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? All right, motion passes. And we'll start with public communications, our communication from our student board representatives.
To start off with the Sullyton High School report, it's kind of small because we have short time since the last meeting. But today was the last day of the midterms. It was 4 days long, 2 midterms each. And today was the last day, so that means it's the end of the semester as well. So tomorrow will be day 1 of semester 2, and it's an exciting time, new classes, and, you know, get the ball rolling and fresh start for everyone. So that is it.
To go on further with our district report, Dernowski Elementary School is kicking off with their annual one book school-wide, where they have one book that the whole school reads, and they're really excited to get that started. To go on at JFK, 8th graded Owen Warner was selected as the recipient of the First Baptist Church Martin Luther King Jr. Award, and he was recognized at the school and will further go on at the First Baptist Church. To continue with JFK, they just finished up their winter music concerts, and the unified sports practices are underway, and soon they will be competing at the competitions. DePaulo has recently made the News Channel 30 last week, and approximately 40 first respondents, including police officers, firefighters, and EMT honors, were worked at their service at the breakfast at DePaulo. Special thanks to Mr. Medancy and Mrs. Arseco for also attending. DePaulo 8th graders are currently putting their engineering skills to the test in their science classes, designing egg dropping projects alongside their 6th graders who are also working on their science and STEM projects. And special thanks to Kevin Solmari from the Sullyton Fire Department, who came to teach all 6th graders about how heat transfer works. And the algebra students are also working on their midterms, so that's excited, preparing them for the next step. And that's it for the district.
And as the winter sports season is going to the halfway mark, we are getting closer to the postseason. So the girls' gymnastics team and the boys' hockey team remain undefeated. Goalie Owen Doty is a finalist this week for the CT High School Coaches Association Athlete of the Week. The unified sports basketball team will play at halftime of the girls' basketball game on January 29th and the boys' game on February 9th. The boys' basketball held a community fundraiser at their last home game and collected many bags of food to be donated to Sullyton Bread for Life. So we had some school records broken in the past couple of weeks. To start off, Jason Calwa, I believe he's a junior, broke the shot put record. Katie Kavanaugh with the 3,000 meters, Chimdi Ogwaku in the 55-meter dash, Walker Mirjeski in the 200 meters, and the 4x200-meter relay was broken by Cole Hinckley, Berenger Xavier, Walker Mirjeski, and Chimdi Ogwaku. So congratulations to them. And one more thing, it's not every day you get to say this, but one of our alum and athlete, Austin Florian, is now qualified to Team USA for the Winter Olympics in the sport of skeleton. I had to search up what that sport was. And I would like to thank the Board of Ed members that showed up for our robotics kickoff last Saturday. We had a ton of fun. I know me and Archie were at the kickoff as well, but we thank you guys for speaking and really hyping us up for the event. That's all for the student report this week. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Are there any questions for the student reps? I just have one thing to say. We were at the robotics team, and I have to say, so we have, I think, the biggest cheerleader I've seen in Mrs. Clark. She was riled up the audience, riled up the members, and I think that was a great start to the season.
Always a pleasure.
All right. Communications from members of the Board of Education. All right, hearing none. Communications from the administration.
Thank you. My report for this evening, a couple of pieces of good news to share, a couple that were stolen already from me. Our students are getting good. We did receive a $500 donation from a resident to help with the Stellar storefront location. So in line with last administrative report, we received a donation as well for the free reduced lunch meal debt. So just nice that people are giving back to the district, and it's much appreciated. Elementary project update. So the referendum date is set at May 4th for the Kelly Elementary School project. we'll be working backwards from there, everything from the public hearings to bringing ed specs to all of you, which is part of, really, it's a formality, but it's part of the grant application process for the state, that the ed specs have to be approved along the way. And we have a district-wide facilities committee meeting Tuesday at 4 o'clock, really just to kind of kick off the timeline, go over everything that we need to do to organize ourselves. I plan on holding an informational session with Kelly school parents in the near future. The last PTO date they had didn't work because we had a workshop the same evening. So, but we will certainly have time set up, and hopefully we can work with them to set up a pack for those that are interested in supporting the project from the Kelly school community. And just as a reminder, that also includes the South End build-out. That was the scenario from the spring that we had selected. The safety breakfast was a tremendous hit, and yes, to the STEPS ambassadors and Mrs. Oresco, Mr. Palmieri was able to come in there. It was just really nice. The relationship we have with our first responders was evident, and they were very appreciative. It's always fun watching the middle school kids circle like sharks because there's a whole table full of food first thing in the morning, and they're waiting for us to be done eating so that Mr. Palmieri can unleash them on the snacks, and they never, fail to disappoint. And yes, Austin Florian is heading to the Olympics, former Southington student. The Kelly Elementary School community is sending along well wishes to him. They're sending cards that his parents are taking with them to Milan.
Nice.
And they're crafting some video messages as well for him for a little extra inspiration. So proud moment for the Southington community. And lastly, I have, for Mr. Pepe, wants to just provide a brief update for you on archery, as we said we would be following up last meeting.
I was able to meet with lead security attendant Tony Casano, as well as Mr. Loomis, department chair, and Mr. Loomis will continue to discuss options with the department, one being to bring the archery proposal as an outdoor unit, as it used to be. If the department chooses to bring that forward, then that would be potentially later this year. It would go to CNI or early next year. And security was fine with that. So, to be continued, it is now in the hands of the department.
Any questions for the administration? No? All right, thank you. Next, we have communications from the public on agenda items only. Is there anybody from the public that would like to speak? All right, hearing none. We'll move on to old business. Town government communications, Mr. Medancy?
Nothing new tonight.
Perfect. All right, so we'll move on to item 6B, the proposed 2026-2027 school calendar, second read.
Move that the Board of Education approve the revised proposed school calendar for the 2026-2027 school year as presented.
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? All right, hearing none. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? And motion passes. Thank you very much. All right, next, we have two new business items. Approval of out-of-state overnight field trips. One is the SHS Varsity Winter Guard going to Westchester Township in Ohio.
Move that the Board of Education approve the field trip request as presented by the administration.
Second.
A motion and a second. Is there any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? That motion passes. And we have a second, Varsity Winter Guard going to Bethlehem, Pennsylvania.
Move that the Board of Education approve the field trip request as presented by the administration.
Second.
All right, motion and a second. Any discussion? Mrs. Camuso?
I'm very excited that the Guard is doing this because I was in the Guard when I was in high school, and I think it's incredible, like, the strides they've made since I was there, which was a long time ago. So kudos to them. Sorry.
Good. All right. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, the motion passes. Next item on the agenda, 7B, is the Southington High School graduation date.
Move that the Board of Education approve Thursday, June 11th, 2026, as the date for the Southington High School graduation ceremony. Rain date will be Friday, June 12th, 2026.
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? Mrs. Clark?
Is this earlier than we've ever done it, and if so, how come?
Because our next board meeting is until February 19th, and so the time that we need to secure some of the vendors and get things lined up, Project RAD, all things like that they work on, it puts us really behind the eight ball. And so, given that this was the second meeting in January, it was kind of first chance I could get to do it. I think our seniors are super excited that there's snow coming Monday if we set the graduation date tonight, because they're off the hook.
Well, that's what I was thinking about, the Snowmageddon that is coming.
Yeah.
And if we have a second Snowmageddon, what is that going to do to the graduation date, or what will it look like?
So by law, it doesn't change, and that's the exact reason why. There are a lot of high schools in the state that actually use venues, indoor venues, because, then they don't worry about the weather, so they'll rent, whether it's the Oakdale or the Bushnell or wherever they do that. So this law was passed by the state a few years ago for that exact reason, because people couldn't get their security deposits back and things like that when dates changed due to inclement weather, so it allowed people to lock things in so that they were prepared for the date without any ramifications.
But just because its graduation date is the 11th, if we do have significant snow issues and whatnot, other students will still have.
All other students
Oh,
actually have
okay.
to make
Just
up
wanted to know
every
that.
day
Okay.
till they get to the 181 minimum days.
Okay.
Yes, it's only the seniors. So they're probably, but I think every senior class
Sorry,
does a
kids, I
snow
just
dance
wanted
the second we set the date.
clarification.
But maybe, perks of being a senior.
Yeah.
Why are the seniors smiling?
I mean, I asked them at the beginning of the meeting, what did you want me to do on Sunday? And they almost jumped right out and be like, just call it. So I'll take care of you guys.
Mr. Bashevsky?
I wanted to say that I'm a little bummed out that it's not on my birthday again this year, but, again, that's great.
All right, we have motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, motion passes. The date is set. Excellent. Let the planning begin. All right, next on the agenda is a presentation on board member roles and responsibilities. We've done this presentation many times in the past at workshops and retreats that we've had as the board, but typically it's been done in private. The workshops are typically just board members there. And so we've asked our Board of Education attorney, Mr. Rich Mills, to come and do the presentation for us today, but do it in public so that not only the audience can see it, but that it'll be on the video, people can watch it and understand, because I do believe there are some misconceptions and misinterpretations of what our, as Board of Education members, roles, responsibilities, and levels of authority, where they start and where they end, versus what the administration is responsible for. So this is a great opportunity for us all to get a little bit of a refresher, and for the community to get a refresher as well. So, Mr. Mills, we'll turn this over to you.
Thank you, Zaya, very much. You want me to, Steve, you want me to just, all right.
Yeah, we'll hit the lights.
Yeah, I'm good. All right, well, it's a pleasure to be here. I know we did do this a number of years ago, and it's a pleasure to do it tonight and to do it publicly. I think these are great opportunities to talk about roles, responsibilities, as Zaya said, limits of authority, where authority begins and ends. So for some of you, this will be a refresher. For those of you others, maybe some of it may be new. But either way, I'm happy to talk through tonight some of the key points. We'll use some scenarios that I think hopefully we'll have some fun with. And I want to keep this conversational and interactive. So even though I have a PowerPoint and I'll work through it, please jump in. Don't feel like you have to wait till the end. Jump in with a question, disagreement, whatever you want to jump in with, that's all good. Happy to work through it. So with that, we'll go ahead and get started. So one of the things that I always like to do is just start out by talking about the respective roles of the board and the administration, because I think it's important to understand that those roles are very different. And the other thing I'd like to note is much of what I will say tonight is embodied in your bylaws. So the bylaws really are your operational framework as a board. The board, over time, adopts and modifies bylaws to govern how you operate as a Board of Education. And so you'll see in a number of places, I will actually refer to your bylaws. So this isn't just me coming up with something that I think is best. You've actually decided as a board, subject to whatever changes you might make in your bylaws as you go forward. But you've already embraced a lot of these concepts in your actual bylaws. So broadly speaking, your bylaws provide, and this is true, across Connecticut in all school districts, that the responsibility of board members is to see that schools are well-run through effective policies and not to, the word is administrate, we might want to look at that word at some point, but it seems a little awkward, but to administer the day-to-day operations of the schools. Policy versus administration. And the administration, importantly, retains responsibility for district operational issues and the day-to-day operations of the school district. So the board really sets kind of broad parameters and policies for the board. The administration then retains responsibility for making sure that we operate as a district in compliance with those broad parameters and policies that the Board of Education sets. And I don't mean just formal policies. You know, you do a lot more as a board, obviously, than enact or modify formal policies. Your budget is an expression of policy, basically. When you make choices in your budget, as the board does ultimately, you're expressing priorities in that budget, and you're setting the framework for how policies will be implemented and carried out in your school district. But the key distinction that's really important to take away from this is that the board policy and big picture issues, the administration really is the day-to-day activities of the school, and it's important that not get confused. And we'll talk through some examples of that.
Can I ask a question about that?
Sure.
You mentioned that it's true in every other school district in Connecticut. Is there a state law that says that?
Well, there's a state statute, for example, the statute that authorizes boards to hire superintendents. That statute says basically that the superintendent is the chief executive officer for the Board of Education, for the school district, and is responsible for carrying out the day-to-day operations of the school district. And a number of statutes in Connecticut make clear that boards are responsibility for adoption of policies and adoption of goals for your district ultimately. So that, yes, I mean, basically, it's certainly consistent with the statutory framework we have in Connecticut, and your policies confirm that. So employee performance and conduct. One thing that's really important to think about organizationally in your school district is that there's only one employee in the district who reports directly to the Board of Education, and that's the superintendent. You have obviously, hundreds of people who work in your school district, and every one of them, no matter what their jobs, every one of those people has important responsibilities to carry out for your school district in furtherance of your educational program. But ultimately, it's the superintendent that reports directly to the board, and obviously, people throughout your school district report through various structures, whether it's within a building or within a program, up through to the superintendent. But the superintendent is the only employee who reports to the board. Obviously, part of your responsibility each year is to evaluate the performance of the superintendent, but really you're responsible for just that one employee's performance. All of the other employees, in terms of performance, conduct issues, any that arise in your district, those are carried out not by the board, but by various administrative personnel throughout your school district. So we'll talk about rights and authority of board members. And again, there are references here to your bylaws, and we'll kind of go through each piece of this. So the first thing, I guess speaking very broadly, it's important to understand that you're members of the Board of Education, but you only function as a full board. You don't function individually unless the board has given you authority to carry out. So no one board member has authority to take action on behalf of the board unless the board authorizes that, either through a bylaw, like for your officers. Obviously, your officers do have certain authority, but other than that, and the officers can only carry out the authority that they're granted under the bylaws or by statute. Other than that, you operate as a unit, as one board. And again, your bylaws confirm that. And you can only operate or take action at properly noticed Board of Education meetings. So when we say authority at meetings only, your bylaws provide, and again, this is certainly consistent with state law in Connecticut, that authority rests only with the whole board assembled in a meeting, bylaw 9271, although you do have some matters that can be referred to committees for advisory steps, and we'll talk about committees, and that's bylaw 9312. And the second piece of that slide on the left portion of the slide, all decisions can only be made by a vote of the board at a properly noticed meeting. So you operate, again, if If you were on a board of directors, no individual director has authority to really take any action. It's the board of directors. You're a very similar kind of organization. You have authority as a full board, not as individuals. And the corollary to that on the right-hand side is no independent authority. So again, the bylaw reiterates that the board is a unit of authority, and that apart from their function as a part of the unit, board members have no individual authority. So, and again, the only ways that a board member would have individual authority would be either through a bylaw or through some sort of motion, approved by the Board of Education. So importantly, the bottom bullet on the right-hand side makes clear that individual board members may not commit the district to any policy or action or expenditure or exercise any administrative responsibility over the schools or command the services of individual employees in the district. So that's important. So no individual authority, and authority only as a whole, basically. You operate as a committee of the whole, and it's important to understand all that. And by the way, I don't mean to suggest that in any kind of demeaning way. Each of you has a really important responsibility as a member of the board. And you have the full right to, express your views and have dialogue about the various issues that come before you as a board. But ultimately, when it comes to taking action, it can only be done by the full board, and it can only be done at a properly noticed board meeting. Importantly, along with that, except when carrying out authority delegated by the board in some way, individual board members don't have any greater rights than citizens in the community. And for example, in the second part of the bullet, access to information by board members is no greater than non-board members, meaning the public, unless you're carrying out a specific statutory responsibility. And we'll talk about some of these, like expulsion hearings, non-renewal hearings, or other board authorized responsibilities. So again, important to keep those principles in mind. You all retain, so when you get on a Board of Education, you don't give up any rights. We all have rights as citizens. Some of you may have children in the schools. You have rights as parents, certainly. And you retain your right under the First Amendment to speak, and the italicized wording is important, to speak as individuals on matters of public concern. But the second part of that is very important as well, which is that board members need to be careful and need to be clear that they're not speaking on behalf of the board. So, if I were on your board, I, Rich Mills, can speak my mind as an individual on the issues, including educational issues in Southington or budget issues or what have you, but I'm not speaking for the board, and I need to be very careful in my communications and the way that I communicate that I'm not speaking for the board, and we need to be very clear on that. One of the things, I think in probably virtually every community, when people get elected to the board, it is a common perception that the board members, number one, that they know everything that goes on in the school district, everything. Secondly, that if there's an issue, that they can fix it. And neither of those things is true. The first one, the board doesn't actually, and you'll see why, the board members can't know a lot of what is happening in a school district. If you think about anything individualized about a student, board members can't know that. That's legally protected private information. And you also can't fix everything. Again, it goes back, you can only act as a board, and you can only act on those matters that you have authority for. So, and we'll talk about the way that comes up, in every community, and I'm sure Southington as well. So, for example, if you are communicating publicly on social media or whatever, you need to be clear and careful that you're not speaking as a board member. And the one thing to really keep in mind is that often your audience, whether that's friends, neighbors, people in an organization you may be part of, they will perceive you as speaking on behalf of the board. So you need to make that distinction. Again, we used to say, if you write a letter to the editor, if we still do that, but now it's a lot of social media posts, that we need to be clear. We're not speaking for the board. We're speaking as, Rich Mills, individual citizen in Southington, however the case may be. So what are some of the duties of board members? One of the first, and this goes along with this, is referral of any parental complaint to the administration, to the superintendent or to the administration. And these come up all the time, whether it's on a soccer field, Stop and Shop, wherever it might be. Someone comes to you, they're very upset about an issue, might be something involving their child, might be something about, a program at a particular school or district-wide program, and they're upset. And they come to you, and their expectation is, again, you're on the board, you're going to be able to fix this for me and address this issue. Very important, again, if you go back to the responsibility of the administration to handle day-to-day operational matters, educational matters involving students, really, really important. We want to hear that parent. We absolutely want to. We don't want to let that concern go unaddressed, but we want to make sure we follow an appropriate process to do it. So if that parent comes to you, you might first ask, well, have you talked to, if it's a classroom issue, have you talked to the classroom teacher? If it goes beyond, have you talked to the principal? Because you want to redirect the person to refer that matter or engage with the administration. But at the same time, you want to let the superintendent know that you've had that conversation and that concern has been raised to be sure that we address it. Often, there will be more to the story. There'll be context. There may already be employees working to address the issue that you may not know about or have any knowledge of. So the bottom line is we want to make sure we address the concern, but board members shouldn't kind of jump in and try to address the concern themselves or commit anything. That you'll take care of it and I'll fix that. I'll make sure that we get that change, tomorrow morning. Because you can't really do that. You don't have the authority to do that. So absolutely reassure the parent that you'll be in touch with the superintendent. We will make sure that this kid's handled appropriately. And another reason for you not to get involved directly is we do have a hierarchy. And if it's a classroom issue, we want to make sure the teacher has been made aware of the situation and has a chance to address the issue. If it goes beyond that, we want to make sure the school principal or the special education supervisor, whoever it might be, is addressing the issue. And it's important that people not try to circumvent that by going around the teacher, the principal, the superintendent, by going directly to the board. Very important to kind of handle that. Sure.
Hypothetically, what if a parent comes to one of us and it has a complaint about the superintendent? Then hypothetically, of course, where would we take that then?
If there's a concern about the superintendent,
Yes.
I think a board member should reach out to the board chair, and say, I have this issue,
And
and talk about the way that should be addressed
And
ultimately.
then what does the board chair do?
I'm sorry?
And then what does the board chair do at that point?
Well, it's all going to be a little bit fact-specific.
Hey, Rich, can you stand just at the mic so that you're recorded?
It's going to be a little bit situational and fact-specific. But, so the board chair will, I think, based on what the concern is and the nature of it, the board chair will help determine, what if any step should be taken. So.
Thank you.
So the second duty we want to talk about is FERPA, which some of you may know stands for the Family Educational Rights and Privacy Act. It's the federal student confidentiality statute. And so that statute basically provides that all individualized information about students is confidential unless an exception applies. And there are some exceptions. But the bottom line is the presumption is that any information we have, whether it's grade reports, discipline referral, nursing records, whatever the case may be, IEP, if it's a special education student, that is all strictly confidential. And under that law, even within the district, the law only allows that information to be shared with school officials on a need-to-know basis. So if I'm a teacher in one school, I don't have any right to get information about kids in another school unless somehow I'm involved in educating those other students, which I wouldn't be. So when it comes to board members, I would say almost never have educational need to know information about individual student record information. There are some exceptions which we'll talk about, things like expulsion hearings. That's an example of one. Residency hearing where you might get information about a particular student. I'm sure in the course of the year, you get a wealth of information about your educational program, test scores, overall aggregate information, but this is protecting individual information about individual students, which is strictly confidential. This third bullet, I'll talk about in just a moment, because you'll have a duty in some cases to sit as an impartial decision maker in various types of hearings, like expulsion hearings, but we'll talk about that just in a moment. Confidentiality, I want to just touch on briefly. Anything discussed in executive session is strictly confidential. The FOI statute, which governs all public agencies in Connecticut, including boards of education, allows boards to go into executive session for very limited reasons. For example, an expulsion hearing. You can conduct an expulsion hearing because there are confidential confidential student records involved in executive session. We can have other executive session about pending claims and litigation. Some personnel discussions are held in executive session. The bottom line is really important that everyone understand this, is that if you learned it in executive session, it's confidential. That's the only reason we can do it in executive session. If it weren't confidential, we wouldn't be able to do it in executive session. So if you received information or got information verbally in executive session, that's confidential. Oh, sure.
So executive session, confidential information has to stay in the room, but board members outside of executive session, if it's between two board members or a couple of they could have those conversations as long as it's private?
So discussing something that was discussed in executive session,
Yes.
just the two board members?
Correct.
That would not breach executive session, but I think it would be extremely important to make sure that that's done in a completely confidential setting. And I would just urge a lot of caution on that, because we don't want to breach the confidentiality. Student confidentiality we talked about, so again, that's FERPA, important to be very mindful of that. That's why if you've been to expulsion hearings, you'll notice that typically at the end of the hearing, all the records are all collected back, threaded. There's a copy here, for the administration, so we have that, but we have a strict obligation to make sure that is kept confidential. The last piece on this, just conflict of interest, I want to just touch on briefly. You have a bylaw that basically provides that board members need to take care that if they have any sort of financial interest in a matter coming before the board or special personal interest in a matter coming before the board, they need to disclose that, and they may need to recuse themselves. And we'll talk about one example of that in an upcoming scenario. So I mentioned hearings. So in your time as board members, these are examples of what we call formal due process hearings. So expulsion hearing. Expulsion hearings, school accommodations, really meaning residency or transportation hearings. Teacher non-renewal and termination. So if there's a non-renewal or termination hearing concerning a teacher. And then lastly, non-renewal and termination hearings for athletic coaches. In all of those situations, by statute, the board may end up having to sit in an impartial hearing capacity in any one of those four situations. So a couple of them, the top two are student situations, the bottom two are employee situations. And in all those situations, we have an obligation to provide the person whose hearing it is, either the teacher or the student, with due process. So, whoops, I think I went the wrong way. What does due process mean? Due process includes a hearing before an impartial decision maker, someone who hasn't made up their mind and can sit, it's like the jury kind of situation. You're supposed to be able to sit and judge things fairly. That's the first component that's critically important. The second is the board has to make its decision based solely on the evidence presented in the record, not what they heard on the soccer field or at the grocery store, or what someone whispered to them in the hall or whatever. They need to decide that based on what is presented during the hearing. And if you for that reason, it is really important that board members not get involved in the issues, whether it's a student matter coming up for expulsion or an employment matter that may lead to a hearing before the board. It's very important that you not get involved in that outside the hearing. So I always say, if you have a situation, some student situation in your district, maybe it's sort of a buzz in the community, or maybe there's news coverage of it, and there may be an expulsion hearing. If the superintendent tells you, I'm giving you just this very basic information, I can't share any more information right now because you may have to sit in a hearing capacity. He's not trying to be difficult. He's trying to ensure that we as a district provide that person with due process. And due process is not just a desirable thing. It's a constitutional requirement. We have an obligation legally to provide, again, it's either a student or an employee, depending on the circumstances, with due process. And the fundamental element of due process is really about fairness. If you think about it, if you put yourself in the hat of the student or the employee who's the subject of the hearing, what's the number one thing you'd want? Fairness. You'd want a chance to be heard by an impartial hearing panel and a fair chance to speak your mind, speak your case, and get a fair decision. So it is very important. And this happens occasionally where superintendents across the state have to say to their boards, I understand that you might want to know a little more about this, but I have to be very careful with this, because if I give you information, I'm going to compromise the district. And also, we're going to potentially violate someone's constitutional rights, which obviously we don't ever want to do. Same thing in an employment situation. If there's someone coming up for non-renewal or termination, and the superintendent says, yes, I saw the news, and I understand, I'm giving you a heads up, there's going to be something on the news, but I can't give you details right now, and I'm trying to, make sure I protect you. So just be careful about that, and be mindful that, again, in those examples, it's not that the superintendent is trying to be difficult, he's really trying to ensure that we have a good process. And needless to say, if we don't have a good process, we have legal exposure, which we don't want. We don't want to violate someone's rights, both because we don't want to do that, in fairness to them, and we have to make sure that we're on the right side of that line. We'll talk briefly about board committees. We touched on this earlier. So under your bylaw 9132, committees advise and recommend to the board, but they don't ever determine, they don't actually ultimately take final action or carry out administrative responsibilities. So committees, I believe committees can be very, very important. Some boards really use them very effectively to do a lot of the legwork and really the work of the board, in kind of smaller groups as committees. But then ultimately, again, everything goes back to the full board based on that, that principle at the outset, that it's only the full board that can operate and take action. One quick note, that second bullet, very important, and I don't think this is an issue here at all, but committees are subject to FOI just like the board in terms of meetings, agendas, minutes, all of that. So just make sure, as a reminder, again, I don't think there are issues here with that, but some boards occasionally aren't fully aware of that, so just be mindful of that. Lastly, I think in this section, before we go to some scenarios, you have a code of ethics, bylaw 9271, and it just this embodies some really important principles. The first, you want to make sure that your upholding and enforcing all laws, rules, regulations that operate, to govern the schools. You want to refrain from making promises or taking actions that could compromise the board. You want to insist that everything we do here is open and ethical, obviously. The fourth, you want to make sure that you're maintaining confidentiality because we don't want to violate any rules on that. And the last one, which we talked about, is we really want to make sure we refer complaints or concerns through the appropriate channel, always letting the superintendent know, so that, number one, he's aware if that phone call is going to be coming, and secondly, so that he can figure out who is the best person to deal with this. It's not always going to be him, might sometimes be him dealing with it, but often it will be within the building or within a program, and he'll make sure of that. So we just want to make sure we do that properly. So why don't we take a couple scenarios, or a few actually. So you just received the agenda for this month's board meeting, and the agenda item, there's an agenda item on there for approval of a proposed transportation contract with School Bus Inc. Your brother-in-law was recently hired as the CFO for School Bus Inc. What should you do about that upcoming vote? So who can,
Just recuse yourself.
what's that?
Recuse yourself.
Step away.
So make
recuse.
sure he gets the contract.
Make sure,
No, no.
that's the opposite.
Recuse
I would
yourself.
guess you disclose that, but you could still vote.
What's that?
I would think you would have to disclose that,
Well, so
but still vote.
it's really, so number one, you want to disclose. You always want to disclose, even if you're unsure. I would say especially if you're unsure. Suppose it's your second cousin. Okay, that's probably not going to be the end of the world, but always disclose. I always say when it comes to ethical issues, you certainly don't want to go over any lines. And my view is you don't want to go in, you don't want to go near any lines. You just always want to be on the safe side of things. So you always want to disclose, and I would advise that you disclose either to the board chair or the superintendent or both, and then they can help you figure out, as Bob notes, sometimes you may have to recuse yourself from any, depending on the relationship or the matter, you may have to recuse yourself from any discussion or consideration or action on an item. Other times, there may be dialogue, and once in a while, if there are sticky issues on this, sometimes districts will call us and say, what do you think of this? Is this a conflict or is it not a conflict? And we can work through. The worst thing you can do is not disclose. So if you play this out, someone doesn't disclose the relationship, the bidder doesn't get the award. Or the bidder does get the award, someone else doesn't get the award. And now they're upset, and they find out, well, wait a minute, there's a relationship here that I think tainted all of the board's action concerning this contract. Then we're potentially in a mess. So always disclose. You can confer with the board chair and superintendent, and we'll figure out whether you have a conflict that requires recusal. If you do have a conflict that is determined to be that you should recuse yourself, that should be total. You shouldn't be in any conversation. You shouldn't talk to the other board members about the pros or cons of contractors. You're out of that totally. And you should be very clear when it comes up for a vote that you're not participating and you're not voting. Okay, so second scenario, a parent is all over social media after her daughter was suspended for vaping nicotine in school 2 days before a high school dance. The parent is livid that her daughter won't be able to attend the dance. Parent calls Benny board member, complaining that the principal overreacted and pleading for the board to correct the injustice. Benny board member calls the superintendent and asks for a meeting involving Benny board member, the superintendent, the principal, and the parent to discuss the student's suspension. Is the board member's request appropriate?
No.
No. Why not?
He doesn't speak for the whole
The
board.
process is to
What's
call
that?
the
He
superintendent.
doesn't speak for the whole board.
Right, so we'll go back, if I can go back. Let's see here. There we go. Did I go back? Yep.
Got a little carried away there.
There we go. Okay. So the there are several problems with this. So Benny board member, the board member is saying, I want a meeting involving me, the superintendent, the principal, and the parent. The board member certainly doesn't speak for the board, that is true. Does the board member have rights under FERPA to any information about this student?
Nope.
No, the board, this is not a board issue. This is not a board issue. I'm not suggesting, when that parent calls you or is upset, that's a concern, and we want to make sure that is getting addressed, and we're going to refer it to the administration. So it is a concern, and it's a concern for the board only to the extent that we want to make sure that it gets addressed. And we're going to take the appropriate steps to make sure that it gets addressed. But if the board member goes to that meeting, it's a FERPA violation. The board member has absolutely no right to know that educational information. The parent may have shared some information, that's up to the parent. Even if the parent shares information, the school district cannot. We are still bound by student confidentiality. So even if a parent goes public with some student situation, that doesn't relieve the district of the FERPA obligations. We still have that. So the board member, what should the board member have done?
Call the superintendent.
Call the superintendent and just refer it to the superintendent, basically. He's aware of it, and let's face it, a situation like this, he's gonna be aware of it. This will already be, given the nature of this, the superintendent, 99% of the time, he's gonna know of this situation, and there will be more context for it. And there may well be conversations or steps being taken by the district to address this. So again, it really illustrates the point that your role as a board member is really to redirect that. You want to certainly be empathetic to the parent, not empathetic to the point of saying, oh my God, I can't believe that happened, that shouldn't have happened, because you don't know the facts. So you have to be careful. You want to be empathetic, but refer it to the administration. Okay, second one. So now we're in an expulsion hearing. And those of you who've done these, you know there are two parts to an expulsion hearing. So the board first received evidence about the incident that triggered the hearing. And during the second part of the hearing, the board received evidence about the student's significant disciplinary history. And at the end of the hearing, the board voted to expel the student. The day after the hearing, a board member who was unable to attend the hearing stops you in the parking lot. You were there, you were part of the hearing panel. They stop you in the parking lot, and they say, rumor has it that that student has been a disciplinary problem since elementary school. Is that true? How should you're the board member stopped in the grocery store or the parking lot. What should you say to that board member? Can you provide information about that expulsion hearing?
Should have been at the meeting.
Said you're not too smart.
What's that?
Not too smart.
No, you can't share rumors. You can't say
And
anything.
why can't the board member disclose that to the other board member who didn't attend the hearing?
It's confidentiality. They were not at the executive session, therefore you can't share that information with them.
Exactly. Honestly, when the hearing ends, even the board members who were there have no educational need to know. So in terms of further developments with the student that might go on, that's not the board's prerogative. Certainly the board member who was not there has no educational need to know, so that would be a FERPA violation if we shared the information.
I can't meet you at Stop and Shop, Mrs. Carmody, for gosh sakes. We can't do it.
Rich, can I ask a question?
Oh, sure.
So to your earlier point, I think to the chair's question, but if two board members were in that executive session for the expulsion and they were talking outside in confidentiality, would that be okay as long as that conversation was super secure and confidential?
Yeah, so I think, and that's why I said, I think that question is always going to, there's a nuance to that question. And something like that, honestly, when that hearing ends, we shouldn't be talking about it. The risk of a confidentiality breach is just too great. So my view is, when you leave the expulsion hearing, that's it. It's over. The hearing is over, the administration will take whatever next steps are going to be taken with that expulsion hearing, but I don't think the board members should be, rehashing the evidence or saying, well, I think we should have done X or Y or Z. You really need to, I think it's best not to have that conversation.
I definitely understand that nuance, but would you further project that to any executive session? I know you said earlier that it's kind of.
I mean, again, it's always going to be, in my view is,
Don't do it.
executive session, confidential, don't talk about it. But I also know that sometimes there can be situations, there's an exception to everything, but I just think if I were a board member, I would operate, and I would advise you to operate on the principle that if I learned it in executive session, I'm not talking about it. I just think it's the safest thing to do. The risk is just too great.
Understood.
But it's okay, I'm just thinking if you have something that's contentious, or, and you're debriefing, it's okay to debrief while you're still here. After, if a decision has been rendered, if we were to, say, be sitting in the back room.
Well, you also have to be, not to get into FOI, but you have to be careful, because if you hang around and keep talking about it, that's a meeting, and so that's an FOI issue. So you have to be very careful about that, because we don't want to, when the meeting ends, the meeting ends. And so you have to be careful about that in terms of further conversation. So.
If I may, Rich's point, realistically, anytime that there's executive session or anything else, like, there's time to discuss it, right? There's time to discuss it in executive session. So I really don't understand, like, why it's even a question of whether or not, we could continue a conversation out. It doesn't matter the trivialness of what we're discussing. I don't know, like, I feel that executive session is truly that. We should treat every situation like that, in my opinion. I don't know.
I'm just
it's a lot
thinking.
easier just to stay out of.
I'm
stay
just
out of
thinking
trouble.
some of them, sometimes they're hard situations.
But we could do it in there, in the room. And we've done it before where if we don't get it done in that 30 minutes before our meeting, then we reconvene out of the public meeting to go back into executive
That's true.
session.
I'm thinking along the lines of expulsions that
Well,
may be difficult. And some are more difficult than others, so to speak. And you're kind of like, that's what I'm thinking of.
Yeah, I just think you want to be
But I get
careful.
what you're
'Cause
saying.
you can end up with some violations
Yeah,
if you're
yeah.
not careful with that.
So just one other question about executive session. So if a board member is missing from executive session, the executive session happens, it ends, and you move on, is that board member able to be brought into that discussion?
So something like, so the expulsion hearing, no,
No,
through that
right,
example.
but executive session.
Yes, I mean, in terms of, there's some issue that is going to be an ongoing issue and the board member needs to be brought up to speed, then that would be appropriate. Again, when you're doing that, though, you're not going to be doing that with 5 other people hanging
Right,
around that are not board members. You want to be sensitive to the confidentiality. But yes, sometimes, I'm sure you, Steve, occasionally get calls, hey, I couldn't attend the board meeting, so I missed that executive session, but I need to know what the substance of it was, because we're going to talk about this next week. That is okay. So it's not about, we want the board member to be productive, and sometimes you miss meetings or you miss executive sessions, and that's fine. That kind of thing is fine. Or talking to the board chair and saying, hey, I missed that, can you just give me a 5-minute summary of what we talked about, so I'm up to speed, and I don't have to waste people's time, at the next meeting or something. That is okay.
Thank you.
I guess, like, as a board, could we agree that then you'd be the appropriate point person to hash that out with, like a missing board member out of executive session?
Probably makes sense to have a.
I couldn't hear
Say
Joe,
again?
sorry.
I'm sorry. So it's more, in a situation like that, then I think it would be wise that Mr. Oshana would be the point person to get that person up to speed on an executive session matter. It shouldn't necessarily be from another board member.
I think, it could be the board chair, it could be the superintendent. Again, some of this isn't, we don't want to be overly formulaic here. Sometimes it'll make sense You might be here and you're bumping into Steve, and can you just give me 2-minute capsule of what happened in the executive session last night? I think, probably the board chair or the superintendent would make the most sense. Yeah.
But it's so many nuances, but still accounting for that we're not violating any civil rights relative to the student that we're talking about. Whether those are-
If it's a student, like an expulsion hearing, you can't, it's over. You can't, if you miss an expulsion hearing, you missed it, and no one should be talking about it at all after the hearing. So I just want to clarify, I was talking about a non-expulsion situation, where you have some other executive session.
regular executive
So, just take an example. The board, we've done this occasionally, the board asked me to write a legal opinion on some subject, and we have an executive session conversation about that, but a board member can't be there. They're out of town. And it's not a student issue. It's about some other issue in the school district. It would be okay for the board chair or the superintendent who was there to say, here's the substance of what we talked about in that executive session. That's not violating anybody's rights. We have to, in that example, we want to make sure that's got to be kept confidential, because otherwise we'll destroy the attorney-client privilege. But that kind of, hey, let me bring you up to speed conversation is okay. But if it's about an individual student matter, there's not going to be a way or any basis for the board to bring anyone up to speed, because there's nothing to be brought up to speed about if it's an individual student matter.
You skipped a slide.
What's that?
Skip forward a slide.
Oh, did I? Okay. Okay, where did I go?
Well, that's fine.
Okay, so another scenario. Local newspaper publishes a front page story, and of course this would not happen in Southington, so these are all totally hypothetical. Front page story about a teacher employed in the district who was arrested for selling narcotics in the community. Article identifies the teacher by name and school. Parents from the school come to the next board meeting, and during public comment, several of them express concern that the teacher must be fired immediately. Unable to resist, a board member responds by saying, rest assured, the teacher is history. So, is the board member's statement appropriate? Yes, the board member had every right to express the board member's views under the First Amendment. Or second, no, the board member's comments have created legal exposure for the board. So,
It's both, Rich.
It's both?
But also exposes legal.
What's that?
It's legal exposure, but it's appropriate
yeah,
because of what they were doing.
clearly we're creating some exposure here. So I'm going to just go back here. So there are
So many.
there are several problems with this. First of all, the board member appears to be speaking for the board. No board member has the right to do that. Secondly, the teacher is, the board member is determining the teacher's fate, not knowing any facts, is all based on a news article that said someone got arrested. An arrest is not proof of conduct. It's probable cause to arrest someone. That's a problem. If this matter ends up, let's assume that ultimately this matter goes to a hearing. Is that board member going to be able to sit in the hearing?
No.
Absolutely not. Why not? What would be the problem?
They're biased.
What's that?
They're biased.
There's no due process here. This board member has decided the teacher's fate without knowing anything, and has just decided, this is what we're going to do here. If you go back to due process, and the fact that it's about fundamental fairness, is this teacher getting any fairness here? Zero. We have an obligation, and the board member should keep whatever thoughts that board member has to himself or herself. This one is, is a major problem. Just so you know, when it comes to, if this were to be a real situation, Every teacher in Connecticut is protected by statute. Some are non-tenured, some are tenured, but they have statutory rights. If this matter came up, this is one of those issues. This is, you have a superintendent. He is going to, he and the administrative team are going to investigate this, find out what happened, and decide what, if any, action might be taken concerning this matter. And under law, as we know from an earlier slide, there may be a statutory hearing where you all have to sit in a hearing capacity, and only the superintendent can initiate that process. The board member has absolutely no authority, not only to not speak for the board, but no authority to compel any steps to fire a teacher. That's the job of the superintendent. So for multiple, again, this wouldn't happen. I know you wouldn't do any of this, but just good reminders of kind of the limits of your authority. Okay. Parent pulls you aside at a soccer game and gives you an earful about his frustration over a recent PPT meeting concerning his daughter. The parent didn't feel his concerns were heard at the PPT and does not believe his daughter's IEP is appropriate. Parent asks for your help, you're the board member, in addressing the concerns. How should you address them?
Contact the superintendent.
What's that?
Call the superintendent.
Yes, I mean, again, certainly, you want to be empathetic, you want to, this parent is upset, they believe they've been wronged or their child has been wronged, that's important. We obviously want to understand, as a district, want to understand. You as the board member really don't want to you should not get involved in any of the details of this. We certainly want to make sure the superintendent is aware of this, and he will work with the people in the Pupil Personnel Services Department to make sure we have this addressed. And it's important also to understand that within the area of special education, there's a whole set of procedures that students and parents are entitled to. At the outset and on an ongoing basis, parents are given a whole set of procedural safeguards so they understand what their rights are in special education. And ultimately, there are rights to file for due process under the federal law concerning special education, the IDEA. There are mediation procedures that can be implemented, so parents absolutely have rights. In this example, we will want to understand and make sure that we're doing everything we need to be doing as a district from a special education perspective to address this. But even if we ultimately determine as a district, the administration, that yes, we've handled this appropriately, if that parent is still dissatisfied, they still have rights. They have rights, due process rights to file for hearing, to file a complaint with the State Department of Education if they believe that that's appropriate, to request mediation. So just so the board knows, within the special education framework, nothing stops at the school district. If someone really believes they've been aggrieved and their child is not getting an appropriate educational program, or that something has gone askew in that process, there are rights that they have. So in this example, again, just really the principle here is that you have a concerned parent, you want to make sure that the superintendent is aware of that so that he can determine, what next step should be taken. And obviously, if there's been a PPT, clearly there's already, there are steps that have already been taken in the district on this matter. But you don't want to insert yourself. Again, there's FERPA issues, there's all sorts of issues with board members inserting themselves in special education matters, but we want to make sure that we refer it so that it can be handled appropriately. Cecil, I think.
Yes, Rich, and thank you for the time. I'm sorry for all the questions, but in lieu of flooding the email box for Steve and for Frank, because I've had a couple of these, and generally, I would say, well, have you talked to the teacher? Have you talked to the principal of the school?
Yeah.
Because there's always a process, right? Steve is, they're kind of the final boss as the administration, but does that really need to go all the way
Yeah,
up
in
the
my
line.
conversation with Zaya and Steve, I think, yes, I think, and I think generally this works well here, that board members do refer people back, have you talked to the teacher? In this example, obviously, this, it's a special education example, so there's a special education, team and framework for addressing those issues. But no, I think it's fine to see if the parent has followed those avenues and kind of approached it through the appropriate personnel. But at the same time, and I think Steve can confirm this, he would still like to know that that conversation has occurred. So that, number one, so he's aware of it, because he may get a communication. And obviously, as the superintendent, it's not just Steve, it's Frank and the People Services team and everybody, we want to make sure that we're addressing their concern appropriately. So I think it's fine to ask those questions. Have you talked to so-and-so? Is it still unresolved? But I think Steve would like to know, just so that we can be sure that that's been handled
For
appropriately.
this specific example, I think when I run up against it with the challenge, sometimes when parents bring concerns forward, is legally, by law, I'm not a member of the planning and placement team. I can't unilaterally change the decisions of a team that were made. I don't have all the information on the student. I wasn't in the meeting. And so I would actually be violating federal law if I said, oh, thank you for telling me, I'm gonna fix that, here's what we're gonna do for the child, absent the team. That has to happen in a plan and placement team meeting with the education professionals who are part of that child's program. That's not something unilaterally I can do. And so I often have to explain that to parents myself, because they think, similar to a board member, that I should just be able to fix it, but I have to also follow the law when it comes to that kind of situation as well.
So it would be appropriate then to say to the parent, have you talked to the principal? And give Steve a heads up,
Yes.
or Frank, and just say, I had a conversation.
I can talk to like the principal of the school or whoever's chairing the
Well, but
PPT
to
or the
have it
special
go-
ed department
Yeah.
and ask questions
Yeah.
to understand, why we arrived at the decisions we arrived, maybe ask questions to get them to think about things maybe they haven't considered. But ultimately, the final decision lies with the people on that
Team,
planning and
yeah.
placement team, by federal law.
But to give you a heads up ahead of time.
Always, yeah,
because,
because if I can help, find
Yeah.
common ground between a parent and the staff, certainly would try to do that.
Yeah. So no, I think that's, Cecil, I think that works well. Because we're addressing the issue, we're making sure we follow appropriate procedures, and the superintendent is aware and can make sure, make sure the appropriate steps have been taken or will be taken.
I think what we've done well here for the past several years, this board has been fantastic, I will say that, referring. But even when we get emails sometimes to the full board, I always respond for the board so that they don't feel like they're being unresponsive or that they're being indifferent to the concern, just to say per board policy, public complaints are to be referred to the superintendent, so I'm responding on behalf of the board. And then I'll say, please call me, I'd like to schedule a time to talk with you further, or can we schedule a meeting and things like that, so that the board knows that I am addressing it.
Yeah.
But it doesn't put them on the spot to feel
Yeah.
that they have to respond to something where it may be outside of their purview.
Yeah, exactly. So, okay. I think this is our last scenario, I think. So, Benny board members convinced that the district spends too much money on employee overtime. Benny sends an email to the central office leadership team, the whole central office leadership team, asking the leadership team to prepare an analysis of overtime hours and costs for all non-certified employees for the past 2 fiscal years. He requests that the information be sent to him prior to the next board meeting. Is that request?
it.
What's that?
See to it.
Is that request appropriate?
Yeah.
What's the issue here?
Who
They don't
died and
speak-
left him in charge?
Yeah,
They don't speak
it's
for
an
the board.
action of one individual, it's not the action of the board.
Yeah. So that's exactly right. This is a board member who thinks that we need to do this. By the way, I was careful, this is not something that already exists. So what's happening here is that the board member says, I want you to prepare this analysis. So I will share with you that this is very loosely based on a real situation I had shared with Zaya and Steve many years ago, not in Southington, where a board member was concerned about overtime. And so he marched one day into the HR director's office and said, I want you to prepare this kind of analysis, and I want it by employee. I want to say who's getting this overtime and how much this is costing. It's too much money. At which point the board member left, The HR director went right down the hall to the superintendent and said, I got a lot on my plate. And a lot of what's on my plate is what things you need me to do. And so I just need to make you aware of this request, and how would you like me to deal with it? The superintendent reached out to the board chair and said, no, if you think that this is an issue, you can raise that with the board chair. You can see if the board members want to put this on as an agenda, but you can't yourself decide, yes, we need this analysis done. This might involve several people in the administrative team and their time is precious, I'm sure. So, and going back to one of the earlier points, your bylaws say board members are not to kind of command the services of administrative personnel. That's not your function. If the whole board decided, hey, you know what, this is an issue, we should look at this, then the whole board could say to the administration, yes, can you please do this analysis for us? But individual board members cannot. So, again, you just want to be mindful of that. Again, I underscore, if you think this is an issue, there's a way to get it addressed, but this isn't the way. So I think that's everything I had in terms of the scenarios and the points, but if there are things I didn't cover or questions or anything you'd like me to address, I'm happy to do it.
Does anybody have
I
any
like
more
Benny
questions?
board member, that's kind of catchy.
What's that?
I like how you use Benny.
Benny board member?
That's pretty good.
Well, I didn't want to use you, Terry. so-
Very good.
Use Betty board member,
It could have been Betty board member.
Well, that's
right?
true. Yes, it could have. You're
Next
right.
time you better change.
I'll change it.
Terry.
Anybody else have any questions or?
Thank you, Rich. Thank you so much, Rich.
Oh, you're welcome. I
Thank
hope
you
that
very
was helpful. Yep.
Thank you.
It's
Always great
nice
to
hear about
see everybody,
reminders about
and
what's
hope that was helpful.
It's a good refresher for us. It's a great informational piece for the community. So, Mr. Mills, thank you. This was-
Absolutely. No,
this was
happy to
very
do
good.
it.
Thank
Happy
you.
to do it.
Thank you.
So.
All right. Next on the agenda is public communications from the audience on non-agenda items. And since there's, okay, there is nothing, so we're looking for a motion to adjourn.
Move to adjourn?
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, we are adjourned.